What it do, Dream Team? It's your boy D. Neal back with another reaction video. We are back with Lost in the Pond. Why do we bash Americans? I wonder this because I feel like all the countries outside of America bash Americans. But I've noticed one thing. When you talk to people, I guess there's a difference. When you talk to people about Americans, like, a lot of people are like, all the Americans I've met are very nice or very kind. Like, it's just America as a whole is mostly what they're bashing, but not like specific Americans, or there's a small group of Americans that they're talking about. But America as a whole and not every American. But we finna see what Lost in the Pond got to say. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon, all up top. You don't subscribe to any of it, put all the links in the description. All you gotta do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. I'm human. I talk back. If you got a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon, or in the description there's a Google form link. What we got? America.
Just running, pretending. I'm sitting down while running. You know, it's
I
not
like
a valid.
the shirt, George Washington, 4th of July. On the 4th of July in the background with the state shades. I rock with it.
Just running, pretending. I'm sitting down while running. You know, it's
you.
not a valid form of exercise. Oh, hello. Guess what I've been doing this week? I've been reading Twitter. It's a big mistake. Nobody should ever do that. But while I was reading Twitter, came across this tweet. Take a look at that.
An American friend and her husband had reservations at New Club Brighton, an American diner in Brighton. They were greeted with a sign that said, "Love American hops, but hate Americans." So they walked out. I would have too. Would definitely take it off my list of diners to visit. Love American hops, but hate Americans. This is a place for you. I love it.
Never do that. But while I was reading,
I think people take things too personally. Like, they take it too personally. I don't understand why people get so upset about these kind of things. I would have walked in the diner, laughed, and had a good time.
Came across this tweet. Take a look at that. Right, and it got me thinking, you know, why do we bash Americans? And I don't mean we as in me and everyone else. And I don't just mean this, you know, politically. There seems to be a tendency toward bashing Americans in general. Now, before I do continue, I should reiterate that, of course, this isn't all British people bashing all Americans all the time, but there is still, nonetheless, this tendency that happens there. And you wouldn't expect a restaurant to write this about other nations or other nationals from around the world, but somehow it's fair game with Americans, and that is something that I've never understood. Of course, now I understand it even less, having lived in America for 11 years and married to an American who would not take kindly to me saying such a thing. So, you know,
Right. We're just an easy target. We're just an easy target. We'll keep it going.
married to an American who would not take kindly to me saying such a thing. So, you know, I just wanted to give some thought as to why we think it is fair game. In order to do so, we have to look historically at the relationship, the now apparently special relationship between Britain and America. And so, you know, I think anti-American sentiment, if you want to call it that, among my British compatriots has existed for centuries. I mean, you could go back to the early colonization of what is now the United States. Even after that, take, for example, Samuel Johnson, the inventor of the original English dictionary in Britain. He was the precursor, I suppose, to Noah Webster in that sense. And, you know, he had quite a strong anti-American sentiment to him. He's the very man, in fact, that said, I am willing to love all mankind except an American. And that's not all he said. I mean, that's not where it stopped. He also said, by his own choice, this was of somebody who would move to the continent of North America, or just the United States in general. By his own choice, he has left a country where he had a vote and little property for another where he has great property but no vote. And in many ways, that's sort of in line with King George III's idea that as a political entity, America had no hope, that it would go nowhere. And of course, then it did. It became independent from the British. You could almost argue that that may have led to resentment, at least at that very time. I think if you were to talk to British people today, they may not even cite 1776 as a reason for their resentment.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people today don't see that as a reason for resentment. I think a lot of people are are thrown off, I guess, with the attitude where they feel like most Americans are like, America's the greatest country in the world. We're the best. Nobody can compare to us. All the other countries are not as good as us. I don't think that, but I feel like a lot of people feel like Americans think that, and they don't like that, and they're like, when Americans say that, they're like, they point out everything wrong with Americans. Like, how are y'all the greatest country when y'all got this, that, this, that, this. Like, what are you talking about? You're speaking gibberish. You're brainwashed. And so it's kind of in that sense. They don't like the attitude, I guess. If that makes sense. You keep going, and I'll just agree or disagree with you.
They may not even cite 1776 as a reason for their resentment against Americans, should they have that resentment. And that's quite an interesting point, right? So I'm not sure that all prejudice toward Americans today is even tied to history. In fact, to its detriment, it often ignores it. In the case of language, actually, quite often, as I've pointed out before, we ignore sort of the historical patterns behind language and how Americanisms came about from Britishisms. You know, I've talked before about the word soccer having been coined actually in England, if you want to talk about lexicon. The same is true of certain spellings of words. Let's look at aluminum. We say and write aluminium back in the UK, and you say aluminum here. Well, aluminum was previously in use in the UK and was debated back and forth between members of the science circle.
So y'all was just making up these words and then giving them to us, but then when y'all was like, we y'all can have that America, we gonna go back to this word. So the way y'all said it is wrong, and we said right, but we made up the word and y'all took it from us, but it's the wrong word, so we got rid of that word and we went back to the. How y'all gonna do us like that? How y'all?
Previously in use in the UK and was debated back and forth between members of the science circle there as to which one we should go with. And then similarly, when we're talking about pronunciation, a lot of Americans have a tendency to drop the H on herb, whereas the British tend to keep it, but that was not always the case. We started out by dropping the H on herb because of the French tendency to do so, just as we do with the words honour and hour and things of that ilk. But we stopped doing that just because it was becoming quite a class issue. If you were doing that in the UK, you were seen as unintelligent at one point. That memo never got spread over here in the United States.
It never made its way over here. It's y'all's fault we use that word. These words is what I'm hearing. It's not our fault. Y'all gave the words to us, and then you changed your mind. You said, we ain't gonna use that. Actually, we gonna pick it back up, saying it this way. I see what y'all are doing. Keep it going.
At one point, that memo never got spread over here in the United States, so they dropped it, and we ignore that fact when we criticize Americans from a linguistic point of view, and that's not where it ends. You could talk about sort of American stereotypes that have emerged. Americans are loud. We've talked about this before, but of course that is quite specific to certain things. And you know, just as it would be in reverse if we were to sort of stereotype my fellow countrymen for having bad teeth because of the depiction in Austin Powers, for example, not necessarily true of all British people. We do guide a lot of our things based on stereotypes. I'm talking now, of course, about the present day, having talked about the 18th century, but in between that, the relationship between the United States, or at least the political relationship between the United States and Great Britain, has changed, and specifically in and around World War II, when we sort of forged the aforementioned special relationship. You could still find quotes such as this, which was actually not by Winston Churchill. It's often said that
Americans will always do the right thing after exhausting all the alternatives. I love that quote. I'm dead. Keep it going.
Find quotes such as this, which was actually not by Winston Churchill. It's often said that Winston Churchill said it. He did not. There's no evidence for it. But the quote came out of somewhere. Somebody invented it. And so I think it's kind of a never-ending thing. But the big question is, why? Why do we bash Americans? We don't do this to people from other predominantly English-speaking countries like Australia or Canada. So we have to look at a couple of things. Firstly, America is a big dog in the world. It's the biggest dog, perhaps, in the world. Has been since World War II. We're very familiar with that idea.
Power-wise, it is the biggest dog in the world.
Biggest dog, perhaps, in the world. Has been since World War II. We're very familiar with that idea. So in the present day, if we're ignoring history, as some are wont to do, are we simply looking at how America is a big dog and applying envy to that? Let's not forget, Britain also thinks of itself as sort of the greatest country in the world. It just uses different terminology. You know, it's very proud of what it's achieved, and rightfully so. I mean, we gave a lot to the world of music. We've given a lot to the world of technology, to the world of sport, etc., etc. And so when another country comes along and does all these things sort of bigger and grander and is itself extremely proud of its efforts, perhaps we look at that with a tinge of envy. I'd be lying if I said we didn't. And at the same time, there is
a little envious, a little jealous. Nah, I just went with y'all. But I can see that as playing into a factor. Because if you feel like you're the greatest country in the world, and then this other country is like, nah, we the greatest country in the world. Like, no, you're not. You're not going to agree with that. You're going to list all the reasons that you're the greatest. They're going to list all the reasons that they're the greatest. And then you're going to start calling the other country obnoxious. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. But I understand that. I do understand what he's saying.
With a tinge of envy. I'd be lying if I said we didn't. And at the same time, there is respect. I think there is respect back in England for the United States. It's a weird sort of back and forth, a Jekyll and Hyde personality that we have toward America. But some other things, you know, through television and through media, we are granted, or rather given, an idea of what Americans are like. So we'll more than occasionally see news stories like this one. So when we see news reports like this, which I should say are very isolated, but nonetheless very eye-catching and loud.
Florida man calls 911 over missing beer so many times he gets arrested. Carlos Bueno Mir first claims that his wife threw out his brew. Then he claims a strange woman stole a few. Either way, cops told him the situation wasn't as dire as he thought. Yeah, you tripping, bro.
Reports like this, which I should say are very isolated, but nonetheless very eye-catching and loud news reports. We have this tendency to assume, I think, through the frequency of it, that all Americans are like this, when in fact, through my own experience, I found it to be not the case at all. You know, I think most Americans I interact with, while just like everyone else in the world may have their own neuroses that are unique to themselves and things of that nature, mostly aren't committing very bizarre crimes in Florida. I think that, you know, partly when we want to talk about British attitudes toward America, Florida, you have to remember
they be doing some wild things in Florida. They do some wild things over there.
You know, partly when we want to talk about British attitudes toward America, you have to remember that Britain just likes to moan. I mean, we do. We're a nation of moaners. I'm not a nation, but I am a moaner by nature because of, I think, my upbringing. But I tend to reserve that for things like the weather or the food that I'm about to eat tonight. It's not usually about a group of people from a nation, because let's remember that America is such a diverse nation that how could you really pigeonhole everybody into the same category? It can't be done. To that extent, it is impossible, I think, to bash Americans. You could bash a particular American for something terrible that he or she did, but to do it to a whole nation of people is very short-sighted in my view. But don't feel too bad about that, America, because we don't just reserve it for you. We do something very similar to the French, and for similar reasons as well, both linguistically based and also imperially based, historically speaking. So, you know, when I see a tweet like that I showed here at the beginning of the video, I almost wish I could encapsulate all of these thoughts into one video and reply to that tweet with said video. And now I can. I win. And so that is why we, /they/the British, don't slash the British. It's not the Revolutionary War. That's why the British bash Americans. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of people, you just kind of go off what you see, whether it's in the media, the people at the top, politicians and all that, and then you just go off of the Americans that you dealt with in your life, and you kind of base your form of America, you base your opinion of Americans from that. And I definitely understand, but you definitely can't put a whole group of Americans in one category. And I'm sure a lot of people aren't doing that when they do bash America. They're just saying America as a whole or this certain group of Americans. And it's very understandable. Me, I feel like a lot of people take things personally. Like, I don't take things personally. You could say whatever you want. Like, I do love my country, but at the same time, I know that we have issues. And you can say whatever you want. Hey, you just roll. You just dust it off your shoulders. It rolls. It's not gonna ruin my day. Is what I'm saying. I believe there's a great group of duo YouTubers I watch a lot called the Minorities, and it's like they say. Usually, people only get mad when people tell them something that they also believe is true about themselves, right? So if you told me my elbow is ugly, I don't care about that. But if you told I am 5'7", so you're like, bro, you're so freaking short, bro. Like I don't care about that, but other people would care about it because you are short. You know there's truth in what they're saying, so y'all understand the example that I'm trying to make. But that's all we got for this one. If you got the point is, don't be sensitive. Don't care what people think about you, and you'll be good. If you got a favorite video you want to see me react to, you can subscribe to Patreon or in the description section. There's a Google form link. Hit the link, fill out your suggestion, send it to me. Want me to get to yours faster? Others fill out premium. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon all up top. You don't subscribe to any of it. Put all the links in the description. All you gotta do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. I love talking to you guys. You guys are the most incredible team on YouTube. It's your boy D Neal, out.